Thank you, Mary. Once again, it was a great privilege to be the Chief Judge of the Graham Perkin Award. Graham Perkin was one of this country's finest journalists, and Will, you should be very proud of your granddad and the continuing legacy that he has left Australian journalism. I'd like to thank my fellow judges, Helen Trinker from The Australian and Michelle Griffin from The Age. I tend to have some spare time during the day. They are both very busy journalists, so please thank Michelle and Helen for their tremendous work in judging this award. As always, we had a lot of entries into this prestigious award, but always a tremendous challenge bringing it down to a short list of 3. So let's bring up the 3 finalists for the Australian Journalist of the Year award. Adele Ferguson is shortlisted for what was a searing investigation into really bad behaviour in Australia's cosmetic surgery industry, made all the more challenging by legal action taken against her and The Age by one of the alleged bad behaviours involved. She also did a tremendous body of work exposing serious flaws in Medicare. So please congratulate Adele Ferguson. We just rightly awarded Carrie for some fantastic work on the ground in Ukraine. Chris Reason has been shortlisted for his work as well. In the early days of the war, you would have seen his stories on Channel 7. As with Carrie, as with every journalist on the ground, where they're with their crews and fixers, camera operators, tremendous courage involved in getting the stories out. But Chris's stories were told with tremendous nuance, really getting across the complexities of the war in Ukraine. He also managed to get the mayor of Kyiv to say bullshit in response to one of the many claims by the Russian propaganda artists, and a grab that literally ran around the world. So please congratulate Chris Reason. And finally, Hedley Thomas has been shortlisted for a body of work including the investigation into the 2013 murder of Shandy Blackburn in Queensland that uncovered serious, awful flaws in Queensland's DNA lab. Hedley's work pretty much prompted a commission of inquiry which led to big changes at the DNA lab that really needed to be changed, and resulted in dozens and dozens, I think if not hundreds, of cases being reopened because of DNA flaws in what was a corrupt system. Another body of Chris's work from earlier saw culmination last year with the jailing of Chris Dawson for the murder of his wife Lynette Dawson. And you'd all be aware of Hedley's work over many years that resulted in justice finally being served. So please congratulate Hedley. And now I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to announce the winner.
Congratulations to all 3 of the nominees, each of whom would be a most deserving winner, chosen from among an excellent cohort of storytellers that's here tonight. And the winner is Hedley Thomas.
Hedley Thomas's exhaustive investigation into the 2013 murder of Shandy Blackburn shook Queensland's criminal justice system to the core. Through his podcast, Shandy's Story, Thomas revealed the Queensland Government's DNA testing laboratory had failed to properly test hundreds of crime scene samples, including Shandy's.
I've gone back to the night of Shandy's murder and delved deep into her life to try to find out who killed this young woman and why.
His reporting forced the government to set up a commission of inquiry, which has resulted in a major overhaul of the lab and the reopening of cold cases. 2022 also saw the culmination of Hedley's years-long investigation into the 1982 murder of Lynette Dawson, with her former husband Chris convicted of Lynn's murder. All of this has been reporting in the fine Perkin tradition.
Well, thank you very much. I'm most humbled. I didn't know whether or not I was any chance tonight, and I scratched out a few notes before I came here, just in case that I got up. But I'm truly humbled. I first want to thank my hosts, John Paul Cashin and Connor O'Byrne from Thompson Gear. I'm on their table. They're great lawyers, and they keep me out of the defamation court most of the time. I've had numerous challenges with a number of these stories because of the obvious legal risk, and JP and Connor have just been heroic in looking after me, and I'm very, very grateful. Of course, my colleagues, Slade Gibson, the best audio producer in Australia in my view, Matthew Condon, Claire Harvey from The Australian, David Murray, Kristen Amiot, we all work together so closely, and Isaac Irons, who won a Walkley Award with me late last year for Shandy's story, and I met him at the Kenmore Tavern. He's a journalism student who was so keen to help, and we got to know each other. I realised what a talent he was, and as a journalist now of 38 years myself, I feel like I can try to help mentor, train young journalists, and working with young Isaac just opened my eyes to the incredible ability and savvy and energy and enthusiasm of young journalists, and it was one of the great parts of that series for me. Michelle Gunn, the editor-in-chief of The Australian, has totally backed everything I do, even though when she asks sometimes, not in a pressing way, how long a story might take, and I say perhaps a year. And Christopher Dorr, my editor-in-chief before Michelle, again, outstanding. And Dr. Kirsty Wright, who is the bravest, smartest informant I've ever known, a DNA scientist who I found through an incredible act of investigative journalism. I Googled DNA scientist, Queensland. Kirsty Wright came up, and I started providing her with documents from the case of the murder of Shandy Blackburn, and she was reading those with growing alarm, and she said to me in mid-2021 that if this were published, we were on the cusp of exposing the worst forensic disaster in Australia's history, one which will change the course of the criminal justice system in Queensland when all the facts were flushed out, and she was right. She was a guiding light to me throughout the investigation into Shandy's murder in the sugar and mining town of Mackay in 2013. It was a brutal murder. It's still unsolved, but I'm hopeful that as a result of the work we've done, it might be solved. When I think about the bravery and the incredible storytelling skills of my friends and colleagues Chris Reason and Adele Ferguson, as well as so many other journalists who could have been up on stage, I think that just again reinforces how proud I am to be the Graham Perkin Australian Journalist of the Year. I just am so thankful to everybody for supporting that. But I do feel guilty because this is an award bestowed on a single journalist, even though the work that we do is it's made possible by the efforts of so many, and they have been integral in helping to develop and produce what I've done. Most of all, though, I thank from the bottom of my heart my partner these past 30 years, my wife Ruth Mathewson. We've been through some incredible highs and lows together, professionally and personally. Being shot at in our own home 20 years ago was one of the worst times, and for years afterwards, just a mere mention of this assault by a well-meaning friend would cause me to just start crying. It didn't matter where I was. That was PTSD. So we got through this and other challenges, and our marriage must have frayed at times through the demands of this amazing craft of journalism, but both of us have loved it so much. And just quietly, Ruth will say that she's drafted some of my most effective, hard-hitting story intros. Ruth has been a fantastic journalist herself, but during the Teacher's Pet research and the episodes that were coming out in 2018, when I was under enormous pressure, I think Ruth decided she wanted to change careers, and she chose nursing. And it's amazing that after 3 years of full-time study, she then became a nurse, and she was working an all-night shift on the night before Chris Dawson's verdict was due. She finished at 6 a.m, drove straight to the airport, got on a very early flight to Sydney, was able to get to the court just in time to hear the judge start giving his verdict. She didn't realise the judge was going to bury the lead. Took him 5 hours to deliver it, and then at the end, utterly exhausted, she flew back to Brisbane to do another all-night shift, sleeping on the plane and elsewhere. So that's the kind of effort that my wife gives. Just briefly on podcasting, I mean, what a medium. I could not have imagined in 2017 that for the past 6 years that would be, everything that I would do. I remember when we were doing the Teacher's Pet, and I thought it might be 8 episodes. It ended up being 16, with the last one dropping on the day Chris Dawson was charged with murder. With Shandy's story, I thought that might be 8 episodes. It ended up being 20, and then another 9 episodes with the sequel when the Royal Commission was called. And that Royal Commission uncovered appalling failure in the government-run DNA lab that's meant to identify killers and rapists from their DNA left behind. And that DNA was left behind, but the DNA lab kept reporting no DNA detected. And I think there's a reason these series end up being bigger than you imagine. It's because people engage with them. They engage with the audio much more than I found I was getting with the journalism I'd been doing in the news pages and digitally. It's the voice, it's the impact of people hearing witnesses and understanding that there are real people here, and there's a relatability that I don't think I've been able to reproduce in actual printed work. But it's so important that we get access to the material that underpins these sorts of cold cases. I don't think it's a coincidence that in the most important stories and cases of my career, being Lynn Dawson's and Shandy Blackburn's, the material that I've had made available to me from 2 inquests in Lynn Dawson's case, from 1 inquest in Shandy's case, that material from police and prosecutors and from members of the family has allowed me to develop the series, to deal with witnesses, to go and track down people who spoke to police, to follow up new leads. Without that material, you can't possibly attempt to try to solve these cold cases. And I think one of the great barriers that a lot of journalists come up against is the reluctance of authorities and some people in the criminal justice system to allow journalism to try to solve these cases that the system has failed to solve. In Lynn Dawson's case, 36 years old when I took it on. And I think we have to fight the attempts to block our access to what should be public information, particularly when there have been inquests. We should insist that we have a chance, we give the families a chance, one more chance to try and solve cases that always could have been solved. And I think police, some of whom are probably concerned that we might hold up to public scrutiny the conduct, the failure, the strategies of police during an investigation that didn't work out. Certainly criminal defence lawyers and some judges, we should, I think, always be mindful that they're carping about our so-called contamination of witnesses. Really doesn't stand up to a lot of scrutiny. We should be able to go back and talk to as many people as possible, because our role as journalists is to try and bring sunlight to these cases that have been in the dark for a long time, and finally give a chance to people like Vicky Blackburn, Shandy's mother, and Chanel Dawson, Lynn's daughter, to deliver justice even after a very long time. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I went for a bit longer, but I just wanted to get it off my chest.